At 07:15 on July 8, 1944, Private Guy Gabaldon stood at the base of Bonsai Cliffs on Saipan, staring at cave entrances where hundreds of Japanese soldiers were hiding, contemplating suicide. 18 years old, 2 successful prisoner captures, 0 backup. The Japanese had launched a 15-hour bonsai charge the night before. 4,000 Japanese soldiers had died in that suicidal attack. The survivors had retreated into volcanic caves along the cliffs. American commanders knew what came next. The Japanese would either fight to the death or kill themselves before surrendering. Gabaldon was 5'4" and tall. He weighed 130 lb. He carried an M1 carbine, 4 hand grenades, and spoke broken Japanese he had learned on the streets of East Los Angeles. Most Marines on Saipan had never seen a Japanese prisoner. The Imperial Army fought with fanatical determination. Officers told their troops that Americans would torture them, rape their families, and desecrate their bodies. Surrender meant dishonor worse than death. The Bushido Code demanded suicide over capture. By early July 1944, the 2nd Marine Division had lost 3,000 men on Saipan. Japanese defenders had killed themselves rather than surrender. Civilians had jumped from cliffs holding their children. Gabaldon had watched hundreds of bodies wash up on the beaches after mass suicides at Marpy Point. He was born in East Los Angeles on March 22, 1926, 4th of 7 children. His father worked as a boxmaker and machinist. The family lived in Boyle Heights, one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. Guy shined shoes on Skid Row starting at age 10. He ran errands for bar girls on Main Street. Police officers paid him in candy to report what he saw at night. At age 12, he moved in with the Nano family. Japanese-American twins Lyall and Lane Nakano were his best friends from school. The Nakanos taught him their language. Not formal Japanese, street Japanese. The kind spoken in alleys and shops in Little Tokyo. Rough, direct, mixed with slang. When Pearl Harbor was attacked in December 1941, the United States government sent the Nakano family to Heart Mountain interns on September 22, 1942. He convinced recruiters he was fluent in Japanese. He was not, but he knew enough to get by. After boot camp, the Corps sent him to the enlisted Marine Japanese language school at Camp Elliott in San Diego. He was assigned to Headquarters and Service Company, 2nd Marines, 2nd Marine Division, as a scout and observer. The Marines landed on Saipan on June 15, 1944. 8,000 Marines in the initial assault. Japanese artillery tore into them on the beaches. Gabaldon wore a baseball cap and aviator sunglasses. He thought it made him look like John Wayne. 2 nights after the landing, Gabaldon left camp without permission. He found 3 Japanese soldiers near a cave. He ordered them to drop their weapons in Japanese. One raised his rifle. Gabaldon shot him. The other 2 surrendered. He brought them back to camp. His commanding officer, Captain John Schwab, threatened him with court-martial for abandoning his post. Gabaldon went out again the next night. He found a cave, shot 1 guard, threw a grenade inside, then shouted in Japanese that they were surrounded and had no choice but to surrender. 50 Japanese soldiers walked out with their hands raised. Captain Schwab stopped threatening court-martial. Instead, he authorized Gabaldon to operate as a lone wolf. That was 6 days ago. Now, on the morning of July 8th, Gabaldon stood at Bonsai Cliffs with a problem nobody believed he could solve. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers and civilians were hiding in the caves above him. They had survived the failed bonsai charge. They were armed. They were desperate, and they were preparing to die rather than surrender. American commanders wanted to use flamethrower tanks to burn them out, artillery to collapse the caves. Gabaldon had a different idea. He would walk up to the caves alone and convince them to surrender using nothing but broken Japanese and a bluff so stupid it might actually work. If you want to see how Guy's crazy bluff turned out, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Guy. Gabaldon grabbed 2 Japanese prisoners he had captured the day before. He told them they were going back to the cliffs. They would go into the caves. They would tell the soldiers inside that surrender was the only option. The prisoners looked at him like he was insane. Maybe he was. But at 07:30 on July 8, 1944, Guy Gabaldon started walking toward caves filled with hundreds of armed enemy soldiers who had been trained since childhood to never surrender. Gabaldon sent the two prisoners up the cliff path toward the cave entrances. He told them what to say. The Americans had warships offshore, bombers overhead, tanks on the beach. Fighting was over. Surrender meant food, water, medical treatment. No torture, no executions, honorable conditions. The prisoners climbed. Gabaldon waited at the base of the cliffs. He could see cave openings 50 yards above him, dark holes in volcanic rock. He did not know how many Japanese were inside. Intelligence estimates ranged from 200 to over 1,000. Nobody knew for certain. The morning was hot. Temperature already above 80 degrees. Humidity made the air thick. Gabaldon wore his baseball cap and sunglasses. He carried his M1 carbine, 4 grenades on his belt, 45 rounds of ammunition. If the Japanese decided to fight, he would die in approximately 30 seconds. He waited. The Battle of Saipan had begun 23 days earlier. American planners needed the island as a base for B-29 Superfortress bombers. Saipan was 300 meters from Tokyo, close enough for the new long-range bombers to reach the Japanese home islands. The island had 2 airfields. Japan had 32,000 troops defending it. Civilians numbered another 20,000. The 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions landed on June 15th. Japanese artillery fired from concealed positions in the hills. Mortars landed on the beaches before the Marines could dig in. The first day cost the Americans 2,000 casualties. The Japanese lost 5,000, but they kept fighting. General Holland Smith commanded the invasion. He told his Marines that Saipan would be tougher than Taro. He was right. Japanese defenders built interconnected cave systems, concrete pillboxes, underground tunnels, artillery positions hidden in volcanic rock. Every cave had to be cleared with flamethrowers, grenades, and explosives. By late June, the Japanese knew they were losing. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo was trapped on the island. He had commanded the carrier strike force at Pearl Harbor. Now, he watched American forces close in from 3 directions. On July 6th, Japanese commanders ordered a final assault. Every soldier, every sailor, every officer who could still walk. They would attack in one massive bonsai charge. The attack began at 4 a.m. on July 7th. 3,000 Japanese soldiers charged American positions along the Tanapag Plain. They carried rifles, bayonets, swords. Some had no weapons at all. They screamed and ran straight at American machine gun positions. The attack lasted 15 hours. By sunset, 4,000 Japanese were dead. The survivors retreated to caves along Bonsai Cliffs and Marpy Point. Gabaldon knew the numbers. He had seen the aftermath. Japanese bodies stacked 3 deep in some places. American casualties were heavy too. The 27th Infantry Division lost 650 men in that one battle. The Japanese bonsai charge accomplished nothing except mass suicide. Now the survivors were hiding in caves waiting to die. Japanese officers told their men that Americans would commit atrocities if they surrendered. The propaganda was effective. Civilians jumped from cliffs holding their children rather than face capture. Marines found entire families dead at the base of Marpy Point. Mothers, fathers, babies. Gabaldon waited at the base of Bonsai Cliffs for 30 minutes. No movement from the caves, no gunfire, no grenades rolling down the cliff path. He began to think his plan had failed. Maybe the prisoners never made it inside. Maybe the Japanese killed them immediately. Maybe nobody believed the offer of surrender. Then he saw movement. 1 Japanese soldier appeared at a cave entrance. Then another, then 5 more. They were not armed. They walked slowly down the cliff path with their hands visible. Gabaldon raised his carbine. He aimed at the lead soldier. If this was a trick, he would shoot first and die second. The soldiers kept walking. More appeared behind them. 10, 20, 30. They were coming out of multiple caves. Some carried wounded. Others helped civilians walk down the steep path. Women, children, old men. They moved in silence. Gabaldon lowered his weapon slightly. He shouted in Japanese, "Form a line. Sit down. Do not run. Anyone who runs will be shot." The soldiers obeyed. They sat on the ground at the base of the cliffs. More kept coming. 50, 70, 100. Gabaldon realized he had a new problem. He was one Marine with a carbine. He was now surrounded by over 100 Japanese soldiers and civilians. Some of the soldiers still had weapons. Rifles slung over shoulders, pistols on belts. They had agreed to surrender, but if they changed their minds, Gabaldon could not stop them. He needed to buy time. He told the soldiers to separate from the civilians. Then he told them to separate the wounded from the healthy. This created confusion. People stood up, moved around, formed new groups. It took 15 minutes. During that time, more Japanese kept emerging from the caves. 200, 300, 400. Gabaldon was now completely surrounded by enemy soldiers on an open beach with no reinforcements in sight and more Japanese streaming down from the cliffs every minute. A Japanese officer appeared at the largest cave entrance. He wore a full uniform, sword at his hip. He walked down the cliff path alone. His posture was rigid, military. He stopped 20 FT from Gabaldon. The officer was older, maybe 40. He had survived the Bonsai charge. That meant he was either lucky or smart, probably both. Gabaldon lowered his carbine, but kept it ready. He spoke in Japanese. He told the officer that resistance was finished. American forces controlled the island. The Imperial Navy had been destroyed in the Battle of the Philippine Sea 2 weeks earlier. No reinforcements were coming. Continued fighting meant death for everyone. Surrender meant survival. The officer listened without expression. He asked about treatment of prisoners. Gabaldon promised food, water, medical care, no torture, no executions. The officer asked if soldiers would be separated from civilians. Gabaldon said yes. The officer asked if wounded would receive treatment. Gabaldon said yes. The officer asked if personal items would be taken. Gabaldon said weapons yes. Personal effects no. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. During that time, more Japanese emerged from the caves, 500, 600. The beach was filling with people. Soldiers sat in groups. Civilians huddled together. Children cried. Women tried to keep them quiet. Old men stared at the ground. Gabaldon pointed to the American warships visible offshore. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships. He told the officer those ships could flatten the cliffs in minutes. He pointed to the sky where American fighters flew patrol patterns. He said bombers would come next. The caves would become tombs. The officer looked at the ships, then at the aircraft, then at Gabaldon, an 18-year-old private wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. The officer bowed slightly. He agreed to terms of surrender. He turned and shouted orders in Japanese. More soldiers emerged from caves. They came in groups of 10 and 20. Some limped, some carried wounded on stretchers made from rifles and jackets. They moved slowly down the cliff paths. 700, 800 Gabaldon now faced a critical problem. He had approximately 800 Japanese soldiers and civilians sitting on a beach. He was alone. He had no radio, no way to call for backup, no transportation for prisoners, and Marine patrols might mistake this gathering for an enemy formation and open fire. He needed to get these prisoners to American lines fast. But moving 800 people across 2 of contested terrain was impossible for one man. If the Japanese decided to disperse into the jungle, he could not stop them. If they decided to attack him, he would be dead in seconds. If Marine patrols saw this mass of people, they might shoot first and identify later. Gabaldon made a decision. He told the Japanese officer to organize the prisoners into columns. Soldiers in front, civilians in back, wounded in the middle. Keep formations tight. No running, no talking. Anyone who broke formation would be shot. The officer relayed the orders. The Japanese began organizing themselves. While they formed up, Gabaldon climbed on a rock. He took off his white undershirt. He tied it to a broken tree branch, a makeshift surrender flag. He gave it to a Japanese soldier in the front rank. He told him to wave it constantly, never stop waving. If American Marines see this flag, they will not shoot. If you stop waving, everyone dies. The column began moving. 800 Japanese, 1 American. They walked north along the beach toward American lines. Gabaldon stayed at the front of the column next to the flag bearer. He kept his carbine visible but pointed down. He wanted approaching Marines to see him as friendly, see the surrender flag, not see a threat. They walked for 20 minutes. The beach was empty. No patrols, no vehicles, just volcanic sand and scattered equipment from the battle. Gabaldon kept looking over his shoulder. 800 people moving in formation behind him. If this went wrong, he would be the first to die. Then he saw them. 3 Marines on patrol about 300 YD ahead. They saw the column and immediately took defensive positions behind rocks. One raised binoculars. Gabaldon started waving both arms over his head. American-friendly prisoners do not shoot. The Marines did not lower their weapons. They could see a massive formation of Japanese troops moving toward them. The surrender flag was visible but small. They had no way to verify Gabaldon was American from that distance. They had no way to know this was a surrender and not an attack. One of the Marines raised his rifle. Gabaldon saw him aim at 800 Japanese troops walking in formation behind one small Marine with a baseball cap. The perfect ambush target. Gabaldon started shouting, "English-American prisoners, do not shoot, do not shoot." The Marine kept his rifle raised. His finger was on the trigger. 800 prisoners, one nervous Marine, and Guy Gabaldon standing exactly where the first bullet would hit if somebody made the wrong decision in the next 5 seconds. Gabaldon kept shouting in English. He pulled off his baseball cap and waved it. The Marine with the rifle hesitated. He lowered his weapon slightly, then raised it again. The other 2 Marines moved to better firing positions. They could see hundreds of Japanese troops in formation. Standard ambush doctrine said, "Open fire immediately. Kill as many as possible before they scatter." Gabaldon stopped walking. He raised both hands above his head. He turned sideways so the Marines could see his uniform. "American utilities, Marine Corps insignia." He shouted his name, rank, unit, Private Guy Gabaldon, 2nd Marines, 2nd Marine Division. "These are prisoners. Do not shoot." The lead Marine finally lowered his rifle. He stood up from behind the rocks. The other 2 stayed in position with weapons ready. The lead Marine walked forward slowly. He kept his distance, 20-50. He asked Gabaldon what the hell was happening. Gabaldon explained, 800 prisoners from Bonsai Cliffs surrendered this morning. Need transport to prisoner holding area." The Marine stared at the column, then at Gabaldon, then back at the column. He asked how one private captured 800 Japanese. Gabaldon said he talked to them in Japanese, promised them food and medical care, pointed at the warships. They believed him. The Marine asked where Gabaldon learned Japanese. Gabaldon said, "East Los Angeles." The Marine said, that made no sense. Gabaldon agreed. One of the Marines ran back toward American lines to get reinforcements. The other 2 stayed with Gabaldon. Within 30 minutes, trucks arrived, Marines from the 2nd Battalion. Captain John Schwab was with them. He looked at the 800 prisoners sitting in formation on the beach. Then, at Gabaldon, he asked what happened. Gabaldon gave his report. Walked to cliffs. Sent prisoners into caves with surrender offer. Japanese came out, talked to officer, marched them back. Schwab asked if Gabaldon had backup. Gabaldon said no. Schwab asked if he had a radio. Gabaldon said no. Schwab asked if he had authorization for this operation. Gabaldon said, "Yes, sir. You authorized me to operate as a lone wolf 6 days ago." Schwab did not respond. He ordered Marines to secure the prisoners and transport them to the holding area at Chiron Kanoa. Processing 800 prisoners took 4 hours. Marines searched every soldier, confiscated weapons, knives, grenades, pistols. Some soldiers had brought sake bottles from the caves. Personal items were logged and returned. Photographs, letters, religious items. The Japanese were divided into groups. Military personnel separated from civilians, wounded sent to medical tents, the rest loaded onto trucks for transport. American intelligence officers arrived to interrogate the prisoners. They wanted information about remaining Japanese forces, defensive positions, troop strength, command structure. The Japanese officer who negotiated surrender provided detailed information. He said approximately 2,000 Japanese soldiers remained alive on Saipan. Most were hiding in caves in the northern part of the island. They had limited ammunition, no food, no medical supplies. They were waiting to die. The intelligence was valuable. It allowed American commanders to plan final operations to clear the island. Marines knew where to search, which caves to target, how many enemy remained. The information probably saved American lives, but Gabaldon never received credit for that. The intelligence reports did not mention his name. By late afternoon on July 8th, the 800 prisoners were secured. No incidents, no escapes, no violence. the largest single-day prisoner capture by one individual in United States military history, and most Marines on Saipan never heard about it. The story did not spread through the division. No press coverage, no commendations announced, just another day in the campaign. Gabaldon returned to his unit. He cleaned his weapon, ate sea rations, slept for 6 hours. The next morning, he requested permission to go out again. Schwab approved. There were more Japanese in caves along the northern coast, more opportunities. For surrender negotiations, Gabaldon grabbed his carbine and headed north. Over the next 3 weeks, Gabaldon continued his lone wolf operations. He captured smaller groups, 15 prisoners, 20, 30. He developed a reputation among Japanese troops, the small Marine who spoke broken Japanese and kept his promises. Some groups sent messengers asking for him specifically. They would only surrender to Gabaldon, not to other Marines, only him. By the end of July, Gabaldon had captured over 300 Japanese soldiers and civilians, more than any other individual in the Pacific Theater, more than any soldier in any American war. Captain Schwab recommended him for the Medal of Honor. The recommendation went to General Holland Smith. Smith reviewed it, then downgraded it to a Silver Star. No explanation given. On August 1st, Gabaldon and his unit moved to Tinian. The island was 4 miles south of Saipan. Marines were conducting mopping-up operations. Japanese holdouts were scattered in caves and jungle. Gabaldon began the same process, negotiating surrenders, talking to soldiers in caves, promising fair treatment. On August 15th, Gabaldon was on patrol in northern Tinian, hunting Japanese holdouts. He approached a cave entrance, called out in Japanese, offered surrender. 3 Japanese soldiers emerged. They aimed rifles at him. Gabaldon raised his hands, started talking. Food, water, medical care, no torture. Then he heard the machine gun. Japanese machine gun fire came from the right flank. Gabaldon dove behind a fallen tree. Bullets tore through vegetation above his head. The 3 Japanese soldiers at the cave entrance scattered. 2 ran back into the cave. 1 dropped his rifle and fell. Hit by friendly fire from the machine gun position, Gabaldon crawled behind the tree trunk. He could hear the machine gun traversing, searching for targets. The weapon was a Type 92 heavy machine gun, 7.7 millimeter, effective range 800 meter. It was firing from an elevated position approximately 150 meter away. The gunner could not see Gabaldon behind the tree, but was firing in a pattern to suppress movement. The patrol Gabaldon was with had spread out when the shooting started. 5 Marines total. They were pinned down behind rocks and trees. Nobody could move without exposing themselves to machine gun fire. The Japanese gunner was disciplined. He fired short bursts, conserving ammunition, waiting for someone to break cover. Gabaldon assessed the situation. The machine gun position was too far for grenades, too well protected for rifle fire. Flanking was impossible across open ground. Standard Marine Corps doctrine said, call for support, mortars, artillery, maybe airstrike if available. But this was a small patrol. No radio, no heavy weapons. Just 5 Marines with rifles against the fortified machine gun position. The firing stopped. Silence. The Japanese gunner was waiting. Gabaldon stayed behind the tree. Minutes passed. No movement, no sound except insects and wind through palm. Trees. Then the machine gun opened up again. Different angle. The gunner was repositioning between bursts, trying to catch Marines in new firing lanes. 1 Marine tried to move. The machine gun found him immediately. Bullets impacted rocks near his position. He went flat, stayed down. The gunner fired another burst, then stopped, waiting again. This was a veteran crew. They knew how to control a position, how to keep enemy pinned, how to wait for mistakes. Gabaldon realized they were in a tactical stalemate. The Japanese could not advance without exposing themselves. The Marines could not retreat without crossing open ground. Nobody could move. The Japanese had time on their side. They were in a fortified position with ammunition and water. The Marines were exposed with limited supplies. If this lasted until dark, the Japanese could withdraw or the Marines could be reinforced. But that was hours away. Then Gabaldon heard movement behind him, close. He turned his head slowly, saw 3 Japanese soldiers crawling through undergrowth 20 meters away. They were trying to flank the Marine position, move through jungle while the machine gun kept everyone pinned. Classic infantry tactics: pin with fire, flank with infantry, destroy the trapped unit. Gabaldon could not warn the other Marines without revealing his position, could not shoot without alerting the machine gun crew. He stayed motionless, watched the 3 soldiers crawl closer. They moved carefully, quietly. They carried rifles and grenades. They were planning to get within grenade range of the pinned Marines, throw explosives, then assault with rifles. 15 moments 10 May. The lead soldier stopped, raised his head slightly, scanning for targets. He saw one Marine behind a rock 30 meters ahead. The soldier signaled to the others, pointed. They began positioning for the attack. One soldier pulled a grenade from his belt. Type 97 hand grenade. Effective kill radius 10 meta. He prepared to throw. Gabaldon made a decision. He could shoot. The 3 soldiers, kill them before they threw grenades. But that would alert the machine gun crew. They would know Marine positions, concentrate fire, possibly kill everyone. Or he could let the grenades be thrown, hope they missed, hope the Marines survived. Neither option was good. He raised his carbine, aimed at the soldier with the grenade, fired 3 rounds. The soldier dropped. The grenade fell from his hand, rolled 3 feet, exploded. The blast killed the other 2 soldiers. Wounded vegetation created a cloud of smoke and dirt. The machine gun opened fire immediately. Bullets ripped through the smoke, hit trees, tore branches. Gabaldon rolled left behind a different tree. The machine gun tracked him, fired a sustained burst. 20 rounds, 30. The gunner was angry now, undisciplined, wasting ammunition. Gabaldon heard Marines returning fire, rifles cracking, trying to suppress the machine gun. Gabaldon moved again, crawled through undergrowth toward the cave entrance. The 3 Japanese soldiers he had been negotiating with were still inside. He reached the entrance, stayed low. The machine gun was firing at the Marine patrol, not watching the cave. Gabaldon shouted into the cave in Japanese. "Surrender now. Your machine gun crew is surrounded. You will all die. Come out." No response. He threw a grenade into the cave. Small explosion. Smoke poured from the entrance. He heard coughing inside. Movement. One soldier emerged with hands up. Then another, both wounded, bleeding from grenade fragments. They collapsed at the cave entrance. Gabaldon searched them. No weapons, no grenades. He pulled them away from the entrance, applied pressure bandages from his first aid kit. The machine gun was still firing. Longer bursts now. The crew was panicking, running low on ammunition, making mistakes. Then Gabaldon felt the impact, his left leg just above the knee. Sharp pain, then numbness. He looked down. Blood spreading through his utility trousers, machine gun, round, 7.7 millimeter, through and through. He had been hit. Gabaldon applied a tourniquet above the wound. Field first aid training. Stop the bleeding. Stay conscious. Keep fighting. The pain was manageable. Shock had not set in yet. He could still move, still think. The machine gun was still firing at the Marine patrol. They were returning fire, keeping the gunner suppressed. Gabaldon crawled toward the Marine positions, dragged his wounded leg, blood trail behind him. 20, maybe just 30. He reached the nearest Marine behind a rock formation. The Marine saw the wound, started to apply a better bandage. Gabaldon waved him off, said the machine gun had to be dealt with first, otherwise nobody was getting out. The Marine nodded. He signaled to the others. 3 Marines were still combat effective. 2 had minor wounds from rock fragments. Gabaldon told them the machine gun position was approximately 150 minutes northeast. Elevated. Good fields of fire, veteran crew. They needed to flank it or call for support. One Marine said no radio, no support available. They had to handle it themselves. Gabaldon said he could talk to them in Japanese, offer surrender, maybe avoid the fight. The Marine looked at Gabaldon's leg, said he was not walking anywhere. Gabaldon agreed, said, "Bring me closer. I will negotiate from cover." 2 Marines carried Gabaldon forward, stayed low, used trees and rocks for concealment. They moved 50 meters closer to the machine gun position, close enough for Gabaldon to shout, far enough to avoid being overrun. They set him down behind a large rock. Gabaldon called out in Japanese, told the machine gun crew their situation. Surrounded, low ammunition, no reinforcements coming. Surrender was the only option. The machine gun answered with a burst of fire. Bullets hit the rock, Ricochets screamed overhead. The crew was not interested in negotiation. Gabaldon tried again. Offered medical treatment, food, water, promised fair treatment according to Geneva Convention. Another burst of fire, longer this time. The gunner was emptying the belt. The Marines flanked while the machine gun focused on Gabaldon's position. 2 Marines moved through heavy vegetation, used the terrain, approached from the left side. The machine gun crew did not see them until they were 30 omerist away. The Marines threw grenades, 2 explosions. The machine gun stopped firing. The Marines assaulted the position, found 3 Japanese soldiers, 1 dead from grenade fragments, 2 wounded. The machine gun was a Type 92 on a tripod mount. Ammunition boxes scattered around the position. Empty belts. The crew had been running low, probably would have withdrawn within the hour. The Marines secured the prisoners, then came back for Gabaldon. His leg wound was serious. Bone was not hit, but muscle damage was extensive. He needed evacuation, medical treatment. The patrol began moving back toward friendly lines. Gabaldon was carried on a stretcher made from rifles and ponchos. The 2 Japanese prisoners from the cave walked under guard. It took 2 hours to reach American positions. Gabaldon was evacuated to the battalion aid station. Navy corpsmen cleaned and dressed the wound, administered morphine, checked for infection. The bullet had passed through cleanly. No arterial damage, no bone fragments, but the wound was deep. Recovery would take months. Gabaldon was loaded onto a truck, taken to the beach, put on the landing craft, transferred to a hospital ship offshore. The ship sailed for Hawaii the next day. Gabaldon spent 3 weeks in transit. His leg was healing, but slowly. Physical therapy was painful. Walking was difficult. The Navy doctor said he would recover full mobility, but his combat days were finished. He would be medically discharged. While Gabaldon was on the hospital ship, Captain Schwab filed his recommendation for the Medal of Honor. The paperwork included witness statements from Marines who had seen the 800 prisoners on July 8th, intelligence reports, about information gained from interrogations, estimates about American lives saved through prisoner intelligence, the total count of prisoners Gabaldon had captured, 1,300 soldiers and civilians, the largest individual capture in United States military history. The recommendation went to General Holland Smith, commander of all Marine forces in the Pacific Campaign. Smith reviewed it. He had authority to approve or disapprove Medal of Honor recommendations. He chose to downgrade it to Silver Star. No written explanation was provided. No appeal process existed. The decision was final. Some historians later speculated why Gabaldon was Mexican-American. Minority soldiers rarely received top decorations in World War II. Or perhaps Smith did not believe one private could capture that many prisoners. Or maybe the intelligence value was not considered sufficient. Nobody knows for certain. Smith never explained his decision publicly. Gabaldon arrived in Hawaii in early September 1944. He was transferred to Aya Naval Hospital near Pearl Harbor. His leg was healing well. He could walk short distances with a cane. Physical therapy continued. The doctors projected full recovery by December, then medical discharge. Gabaldon would return to civilian life at age 18. His war was over, but the war itself was not over. American forces were pushing toward Japan. More islands to capture, more battles to fight. Ujima, Okinawa, the Japanese home islands. Gabaldon read reports in the hospital, followed the progress, wondered if his methods could have saved more lives, if other Marines could negotiate surrenders instead of fighting to the death. One evening in late September, a Navy officer visited Gabaldon in the hospital. He carried official paperwork. He informed Gabaldon that he was being awarded the Silver Star for extraordinary heroism on Saipan Antonine. The medal would be presented in a ceremony once he recovered. Gabaldon asked about the Medal of Honor recommendation. The officer said it had been reviewed and adjusted. No further information available. Gabaldon accepted the Silver Star. He knew it was a significant decoration. Many Marines never received any medals, but he also knew that capturing 300 prisoners was unprecedented. Unprecedented actions usually received unprecedented recognition. Something had gone wrong in the approval process, but there was nothing he could do about it. In November 1944, Gabaldon was medically discharged from the Marine Corps. He returned to Los Angeles. His leg had healed. He could walk without assistance, but he had a permanent limp, and he had memories that would not fade. Gabaldon returned to East Los Angeles in November 1944. He was 18 years old. He had been in combat for 5 months. He had captured more enemy prisoners than any American soldier in history, and almost nobody knew about it. The neighborhood looked the same. Same streets, same buildings, same people. But Gabaldon had changed. He had nightmares about the bonsai charge, about bodies stacked on beaches, about civilians jumping from cliffs, about the machine gun on Tinian. The memories did not fade with time. They became more vivid. He tried to reconnect with old friends, but most were still overseas, fighting in Europe or the Pacific. The ones who had returned did not talk about combat. Nobody wanted to hear war stories. Gabaldon stopped mentioning Saipan, stopped talking about the prisoners. People did not believe him anyway. One Marine capturing 800 Japanese sounded like propaganda, like a Hollywood movie, not real. In February 1945, Gabaldon received his Silver Star in a small ceremony at the Federal Building in Los Angeles. A Navy officer presented the medal, read the citation, thanked him for his service. The ceremony lasted 15 minutes. No press coverage, no family photos, just Gabaldon and the officer and an empty room. The war ended in August 1945. Japan surrendered after atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Gabaldon watched the celebrations in Los Angeles, people dancing in the streets, hugging strangers, crying with relief. He felt nothing, just emptiness. The war was over, but the memories remained. Gabaldon struggled to find work. His leg had healed, but the limp was permanent. Employers did not want to hire disabled veterans. He tried working in machine shops, construction sites, warehouses. Nothing lasted. He moved frequently, Los Angeles, Mexico, Alaska, searching for something he could not define. In 1957, a television producer contacted Gabaldon. The show was called This Is Your Life. They wanted to feature his story. Gabaldon agreed. The episode aired with Marine Corps veterans confirming his prisoner captures. The show reached millions of viewers. Suddenly, people believed him. Letters arrived from across the country. Veterans who had served on Saipan, relatives of Marines who had been there, people thanking him for his service. Hollywood noticed. In 1959, Allied artists, pictures began developing a film about Gabaldon's experiences on Saipan. The movie was titled Hell to Eternity. Gabaldon served as a consultant during filming. He helped with dialogue, corrected historical details, made sure the Japanese language was accurate, but Hollywood made changes. They cast Jeffrey Hunter as Gabaldon. Hunter was 6 feet tall, blue eyes, Scottish-American, nothing like the 5'4" Mexican-American teenager who actually lived the story. Gabaldon protested. The studio said Hunter was bankable. Audiences wanted a leading man who looked like a movie star, not like the real Guy Gabaldon. The film was released in 1960. It was moderately successful. Critics praised the action sequences. The film depicted the bonsai charge, the prisoner captures, the lone wolf operations, but it romanticized the story, made it cleaner, more heroic, less complicated than reality. Gabaldon watched the premiere. He said later that Jeffrey Hunter did not look anything like him. But the film brought attention to his story. 1 month after the film's release, the Marine Corps announced it was upgrading Gabaldon's Silver Star to the Navy Cross, the second highest military decoration for valor. The upgrade came 16 years after the original recommendation for Medal of Honor. No explanation was given for the timing. Many assumed the publicity from the film pressured the Marine Corps to act. The Navy Cross ceremony was held in San Diego. Marine Corps Common General David Shupe presented the medal. Shupe had fought at Tarawa. He understood the Pacific War. He told Gabaldon that his actions on Saipan had saved American and Japanese lives. That negotiation was often braver than fighting. That Gabaldon deserved recognition, but questions remained. Why not the Medal of Honor? Gabaldon had been recommended by his commanding officer. Witnesses confirmed the prisoner captures. Intelligence reports documented the value of information gained. 1,300 prisoners was unprecedented. What more did the Marine Corps need? Some suggested racism. Mexican-American soldiers rarely received top decorations during World War II. Others said the numbers seemed impossible, that one Marine could not realistically capture that many prisoners, that Gabaldon must have exaggerated. But the witnesses were clear, the prisoners were counted, the records existed. After receiving the Navy Cross, Gabaldon moved to Saipan. He lived there for 20 years, built a business, raised a family, helped establish youth programs, became part of the community. The island where he had fought became his home. Japanese tourists sometimes recognized him, thanked him for treating their ancestors with respect during the war, for keeping his promises about humane treatment. In 1990, Gabaldon published his memoir, Saipan, Suicide Island. The book detailed his experiences, the prisoner captures, the negotiations, the combat, the aftermath. It sold modestly. Military historians used it as a source, but it never reached mainstream audiences. Throughout his later life, Gabaldon advocated for his Medal of Honor upgrade. He contacted politicians, military officials, veterans organizations. He argued that his actions met the criteria, that politics or prejudice had blocked the award, that justice delayed was justice denied. But the recommendation never advanced beyond initial review. In 2005, Gabaldon received the Chesi Puller Award from the World War II Veterans Committee. The award recognized Marines who demonstrated extraordinary heroism but received insufficient recognition. It was not the Medal of Honor, but it acknowledged that something had gone wrong with the original recommendation process. Guy Gabaldon died on August 31, 2006. He was 80 years old. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His Navy Cross, his Silver Star, his Purple Heart, but not the Medal of Honor he believed he deserved. Guy Gabaldon's methods changed how the United States military approached prisoner capture operations. Before Saipan, the prevailing assumption was that Japanese soldiers would never surrender, that every cave had to be cleared with flamethrowers and explosives. That negotiation was impossible. Gabaldon proved that assumption wrong. After the war, military analysts studied his techniques. They examined how he used language, how he made promises and kept them, how he built trust through consistency. The analysis influenced psychological operations training, interrogation techniques, prisoner handling procedures. The military realized that cultural understanding could be as valuable as firepower, but Gabaldon never received full recognition during his lifetime. The Medal of Honor question haunted him. He spent decades advocating for the upgrade. He contacted every Marine Corps Common from 1960 through 2005. He wrote letters to Congress, appeared at veteran events, told his story repeatedly, hoping someone would listen, hoping justice would prevail. In 1998, several of Gabaldon's fellow Marines from Saipan launched a campaign to upgrade his Navy Cross to Medal of Honor. They gathered witness statements, located intelligence reports, built documentation showing the impact of his prisoner captures. The campaign gained support from Hispanic veteran organizations, from military historians, from members of Congress. The recommendation reached the Secretary of the Navy, but it stalled. The problem was time. Medal of Honor recommendations had a strict timeline. They had to be submitted within 3 years of the action. Gabaldon's original recommendation had been downgraded in 1944. By 1998, it was 54 years too late. The law allowed no exceptions. Advocates argued the rule was unjust, that Gabaldon had been denied proper recognition due to prejudice or error, that extraordinary circumstances warranted exception. But the Department of Defense maintained its position. No matter how deserving, the timeline had expired. The decision was final. Some military historians disagree about whether Gabaldon truly captured 800 prisoners in one day. Lieutenant Robert Cheeks, a Marine Japanese language officer who served on Saipan, expressed skepticism in later interviews. He suggested Gabaldon exaggerated the numbers, that many prisoners were civilians, not combatants, that other Marines helped with the capture but received no credit. But the official records support Gabaldon's account. Navy Cross citation states over 1,000 prisoners. Captain John Schwab's recommendation describes the 800 captured on July 8th. Intelligence reports reference information gained from mass surrenders. Multiple Marines witnessed the column of prisoners on the beach. The documentation exists. The numbers are verified. What cannot be disputed is that Gabaldon developed methods that worked, that he saved lives on both sides. that he proved negotiation could succeed where violence would have failed, that his courage was demonstrated not through killing, but through risk. Walking alone toward enemy positions required a different kind of bravery, one that military culture often undervalues. Today, a memorial plaque honoring Guy Gabaldon stands at the Saipan American Memorial Park on Saipan. The plaque describes his prisoner captures, his methods, his impact. Japanese tourists visit the site. Some leave flowers, some leave notes, thanking him for treating their grandfathers with dignity during surrender. In 2018, documentary filmmakers interviewed the last surviving members of Gabaldon's unit. The Marines confirmed his story, described watching him walk toward caves alone, seeing him return with hundreds of prisoners. They said Gabaldon never bragged about his actions, never sought glory. He just did what he thought was right, and he lived with the consequences. The United States Marine Corps teaches Gabaldon's methods at cultural awareness training courses. Future Marines learn about psychological operations, about building rapport with enemy combatants, about the strategic value of prisoners, about how one teenager with broken Japanese saved thousands of lives through courage and creativity rather than firepower. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about Marines who saved lives with broken Japanese in a bluff. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Guy Gabaldon doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that.